All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Camilla Maxood and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed on the City Council's website so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves. Please remember to turn off your microphone once you've introduced yourself.
Hello, I'm Kate Sadler and I'm the lead officer for the committee.
Councillor John Illingworth from Kirkstall Ward.
Councillor Paul Trustwell, Middleton and Belisle.
Afternoon, Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Good afternoon, Tim Rollett from the Council's Intelligence and Policy Service.
Louise Ivans, Principal Audit Manager.
Julia Brannan, Audit Manager.
Jonathan Foster, Senior Audit Manager.
Louise Booth, Head of Internal Audit.
Kieran Dennett, Head of Procurement and Commercial Services.
Victoria Bradshaw, the Council's Chief Finance Officer.
Richard Ellis, Deputy Chief Officer, Financial Services.
Mary Hasnip, Head of Finance in Corporate Financial Management.
Good afternoon, Rebecca Roberts, Legal Services.
Good afternoon, Linda Wild, Independent Member.
Apologies for being late, Chair. Just get my breath back. Jonathan Bentley, Councillor for Wheatwood.
Peter Harrendall, Woodley Ward. Councillor Mike Foster for Ardsley and Robin Hood.
Good afternoon, John Grieve, Governance Services, and I'll be clerk in today's meeting.
Thank you. Moving to agenda item number 1.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, there were no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item 2, there are no items where we need to exclude the press or public. Under agenda item 3, late items. I'm not aware of any late items of business. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask members to declare any interests, please? I'll take that as none. Agenda item 5, apologies for absence. Just one chair, and that's Councillor Schmeltz. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are the minutes a correct recording of the meeting held on the 24th of September? Are there any matters arising on the minutes?
Chair, there are 3 matters that I'm aware of. Firstly, on minute 35 relating to the PSN submission from the council, I've had a note confirming that the Information Governance and Cyber Service are pleased to report that the second PSN submission entered within the guidelines set out by the Cabinet Office was successful. LCC therefore have a PSN certificate which will ease compliance work across the council and enable data to continue to be shared where it's needed. The work completed by the many and varied members of the PSN task force has been celebrated by IDS with a nomination for the Awards for Excellence in the category Team of the Year. So the team will now continue into 2022 with the annual IT health check taking place in January and planned PSN submission date for July. In relation to minute 37, the audit arrangements in relation to Treasury management were confirmed with members by email on the 19th of November, and minute 39, following the discussion in relation to CSQs, the chair wrote to the Chief Executive and Director of Resources at the beginning of October, who undertook to mention the matter in corporate leadership team and also circulated a communication to the extended corporate leadership team on the 22nd of October.
Do members have any further matters to raise? Thank you. I now invite Richard to present the report on item 8, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual report to this committee with regard to providing assurance that the council has established effective financial control environment, including robust arrangements. And also this report fulfills a requirement in terms of the Chief Finance Officer's protocol, which is part of the council's constitution, just to confirm that the arrangements set out in the protocol have been complied with. The report itself concerns it with the details in terms of supporting that assurance. So specifically in terms of the documents, it considers the references the budget principles document that was agreed at Executive Board in July 2019. It also details the arrangements in place specifically as part of the council's constitution, and that's detailed on page 24. It also then specifically, as required by the Chief Finance Officer's protocol, just in terms of how the council complies with SIPFA statement in terms of the role of the Chief Financial Officer, and that's detailed again on page 24 going into page 25. It then also considers how financial services support the Chief Financial Officer to deliver her statutory responsibilities. And then it provides detail as well on page 28 in terms of the officer oversight, in terms of the systems of control that we have in place. And then following that, it also details the role of members and the democratic oversight as well. And it details in terms of the role of Executive Board, full council, etc. It also recognises the requirement to clearly communicate the arrangements that we have in place, and then also contained within the report, it then puts down in some detail in terms of the arrangements we have for sort of financial planning and budget setting, both from a capital and a revenue perspective. And it also details as well the monitoring arrangements that we have in place, again, not just in terms of the revenue budget, but also the capital programme as well. It also considers the role of the internal officer process for the determining the integrity of the arrangements that the council has in place. And then it also references on page 38 the respective roles of internal audit and the role they have in terms of providing assurance to members. Your key core financial systems and processes are robust, and also the role of external audit in terms of providing that independence assurance on the council's accounts as well. The report considers the adequacy of those controls as well, and it then considers towards the end of the report on page 41 just opportunities for improvement. So it recognises, and just in terms of we've had the financial ledger for the council we've had for a number of years, and the process we're going through currently for the re-procurement of a new system. It also references the requirement to make sure that we have appropriate arrangements in place for dealing with IR 35. And it also references on paragraph 63, the outcome of a recent survey in terms of internal control, in terms of recognition of having financial regulations in place, arrangements for obtaining advice and guidance. And generally there's a good recognition in terms of people being aware of those arrangements, but there are opportunities for improvement as well, and they're detailed on page 45 towards the end of the report. But overall, the report concludes that there are appropriate arrangements in place for the system of internal control, and that we follow the Chief Officer protocol. Thank you, Chair, and happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions from members? Yes, Councillor Foster.
Just a quick one. On page 30, you talk about briefings for new councillors. I'm probably the newest councillor that's on this committee. And I think it'd be fair to say I received some briefing, but no training. Can you just explain, is it briefing for councillors or training?
Traditionally, councillor, is that there has been, when new members have been elected to the council, there's a series of training sessions that take place, and specifically there's been a finance presentation in terms of an introduction to local government finance, picking up the sort of key aspects of that in terms of how local government's funding, key issues, key reports and stuff like that. And that's usually organised through the sort of governance. If that's not happened, then clearly we need to make sure that that does happen. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be useful, because I'll be honest with it, it may be I've missed an email or a Zoom meeting or something, but something seems to have gone slightly awry there with my understanding of quite a few of the financial issues that affect the role.
Could have been due to the COVID, councillor.
I guess the next question I would ask on that then, is there a verification process then to make sure that people have had the training, or that you're aware that they haven't?
I'd try through your group training section, I would say. Any more questions? No. Does the committee agree the recommendation set out on page 17 of the agenda pack, which is to note the Chief Officer Financial Services assurances that A, the appropriate systems and procedures are in place to ensure that there is sound financial management and control across the authority, and B, the arrangements set out in the Chief Finance Officer's protocol have been complied with. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 9. I'd like to invite Richard again to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report concerns itself with the proposed procurement of external auditors to the council for the statutory accounts for the 5-year period starting from 2023-24. As members be aware, is the council's current external auditors are Grant Thornton, who were appointed following a council decision in 22nd of February 2017, and their appointment covers the audit period up to 2022-23. The council now needs to make a decision on how it will appoint external auditors for the accounting periods 2023-24 onwards, and they need to be appointed by the sort of statutory deadline of the 31st of December 2022. In terms of the options that the council has in terms of a procurement route, there are 3 options. The first one is to appoint its own auditor, which also requires it to follow the procedure set out in the Act. We can also act jointly with other local authorities to procure an auditor. Or thirdly, we can opt into the National Auditor Appointment Scheme, which is administered by a body designated by the Secretary of State, and that current body is the Public Sector Audit Appointments Limited, or PSAA, as it's more commonly known. After considering the 3 options that I've just run through, the recommendation is that the council joins into the sector-wide procurement conducted by PSAA on the basis, as set out and detailed in the report, that the collective procurement will reduce costs to the sector and to individual authorities. If we don't use the national appointment arrangements, and the council would need to sort of establish its own auditor panel with independent chair and independent members as well. And also, it's in terms of value for money and cutting cost, it provides the best opportunities to secure the appointment of a qualified registered auditor, as there are currently only 9 accredited local firms. And if the council was to have the option whereby it goes alone or goes in conjunction with other local authorities, it would be drawing in on the same pool of audit firms as well, and then the potential risk that we will be unable to appoint auditors to audit our statutory accounts. In terms of the requirements, it's for this committee to recommend the appointment, and that then will need to be considered at full council to agree the decision, to opt into the procurement route in terms of going through PSAA. In terms of the council, in order to opt into the PSAA procurement route, we do need to formally respond back to them by the 11th of March 2022. In terms of the rest of the process, that's detailed in the report on page 53, is that if the council chooses to go down the PSAA route in the spring and summer of next year, so with the process for procuring individual appointments, and then that will be completed by August 2022. During the autumn, there'll be consultation with the opted-in local authorities on proposed auditor appointments, and then at the end of next year, the 31st of December, there'll be the confirmation of who is the appointed auditor. Thank you, Chair. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Harron?
Yes, please. Under the proposed and most sensible method of appointing auditors, what's Leeds Council's involvement in the negotiation of the audit fee?
All of the procurement itself will be undertaken. We're signing in to go through the procurement route with PSAA, and they will get involved in terms of negotiating that fee. Ultimately, when the auditor is appointed or recommended, we will know what the fee is at the same time then, Councillor.
Does that mean that we're not involved in negotiating and we have to pay what these people recommend or agree?
That's correct, Councillor, yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. Does the committee agree the recommendation set out on page 48 of the agenda pack, which requests the committee to... Sorry. Oh, sorry, I do apologise, Victoria.
I was just going to come in and say that when PSA are doing the negotiations on our behalf, excuse me, they are representing all local authorities, excuse me, and we do get value for money. And that we have seen that the fee has been reduced over a number of years, and especially the last year when they did negotiate on our behalf. What I would say was once the fee's set, then we can, if there's any changes to the workloads, etc., that are expected by the external auditors, then we do go into negotiation and have a discussion with PSAA around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Illingworth.
We have meetings, the SIPFA initiative, which to my memory alter the basis on which audits are being done, or could have quite a radical effect on the audit procedure, and whether we get any indication of whether our auditor is likely to be of a more sort of conservative bent with a small c, or whether they're likely to be radicalised and making new departures in audit. And I think we should have an opinion on that as what we want to see, and some chance to influence the appointment process. And is that going to happen, or are we going to get what we're given and be pleased with it?
Councillor, in terms of by signing into this process, this will be the preferred procurement route, and PSAA will do that on our behalf, and we'll get the benefits as outlined in the report. In terms of that, in terms of the scope of the order, that is again as detailed and put, that be fairly prescriptive, whichever procure in terms of what they do and the nature of the audit they have to undertake. That be the same audit whether we go and procure it ourselves, or whether you go in with another local authority, or whether we go down this PSAA procurement route as well. That in terms of, there's some details in the report there, just say in terms of the background, how the different environment probably from 2017 when we procured the last one, but it is pretty formulaic and pretty prescriptive in terms of the work and the coverage that they have to do and the standards they have to achieve. Thank you.
Turn your microphone off. Thank you. Councillor Truswell.
Chair, I just wanted to confirm that what we're being recommended to do, and I think it's the best approach, it minimises risk to a very great extent, is identical to the process we went through when previously appointing an auditor. And if it isn't, what are the differences? Because I read the first sentence of the report saying that it was a procurement led via PSSA Limited. So is there a difference, or are we just simply doing what we did before?
We're doing exactly what we did last time, Councillor Trustwell. This is with the PSA.
I'll do.
Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I think, Chair, as long as whoever is appointed going through the system are aware that they're working to work for us and not the other way around, because over the years we have had some experiences with auditors. I won't name them going back. Maybe Councillor, you remember Councillor Harron going back and on this board. So that's the main thing, Chair, that because the council do pay a lot of money and we want a good service and where they're working to deliver for us and they are Leeds people. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any further questions? Thank you. Does the committee agree the recommendations are set out on page 48 of the agenda pack, which requests the committee to recommend to full council that the council accepts public sector audit appointments invitation to opt into the sector-led option for the appointment of external auditors from 2023 to 2024? Thank you. We'll move to item 10, procurement review update report, and I invite Kieran to present the report. Thank you.
Hi. To recap some of the background to this report, we brought the annual procurement assurance report to this committee in July this year. And that report provided an assurance that the council's procurement arrangements are fit for purpose, effectively communicated and routinely complied with. In June of this year, just before we brought that report to committee, we'd invited the LGA to facilitate a review of the council's procurement function to be undertaken by peers from other authorities. And at the time we reported in July, we didn't have the recommendations from the LGA review. So one of the recommendations that was agreed by this committee back in July was that we should return with a further report, and that's what this report does largely. I'll come to sort of the LGA recommendations and the action plan that has developed as a consequence of that in a moment. But this report also takes the opportunity to consult cross-party on a sort of relatively minor amendment to the Constitution that we're looking to make. We've reviewed the contracts procedure rules recently, and we noticed a small inconsistency between Article 14 and Article 13 of the Constitution. Article 14, amongst other things, deals with signing contracts. Article 13 relates to decision making. Under Article 13, there's a simplified process for decisions up to and including £100,000. Under Article 14, in terms of signing contracts, there's a simplified process up to £100,000. So if we ended up with a contract that's exactly at £100,000, we have a simplified process in terms of decision making, but a more complex process in terms of signing. So what we're looking to do is increase the threshold under Article 14 in terms of signing to allow the simplified process to apply to contracts at £100,000. It's essentially 1 penny that we're looking to increase the threshold by. But as I say, we're looking to take the opportunity to consult cross-party at this forum. So that's that part of the report. The main part of the report, as I mentioned before, is coming back to provide an update about a review facilitated by the LGA. And there's more detail in the report from page 61 onwards. To set a bit of context, the council's one of the areas of the council's core business transformation programme relates to P2P, which refers to procure to pay. And that's everything that the council does, from procuring a contract through contract management of that contract to paying invoices in relation to that contract. And what we're looking to do as part of the P2P review is to sort of transform and modernize all that activity that takes place in that regard. We're looking to make processes more efficient and effective. We're looking to use systems that automate the processes as much as possible, and also provide us with useful data that can better inform decision making. And as part of that review of those processes and systems, we invited the LGA to come in and review procurement practices in Leeds and give their views and recommendations on how we could improve, essentially. So those recommendations are included in those appendices from page 61 of the report onwards. And we've produced an action plan that responds to those recommendations. In terms of the timings for delivery of the action plan, we split it into 3 phases so that it fits with the broader core business transformation program. So the first phase is sort of quick wins, things that we can deliver straight away. They're not dependent on new technology or anything like that. The second phase will come out of the new technology that we've adopted, or be supported by a transformation partner that we're looking to procure at the moment. And they also could be impacted by the government's review of procurement regulations. So that's why some of the things have been sort of pushed back a little bit, so we can get that, which we're anticipating in 2023. And then the final phase, phase 3, is things that we're looking to put in place, but they're dependent on actually having the new technology and new systems in place in order to be able to deliver those. I wouldn't intend to go through each of the actions in detail, but I'm happy to take any specific questions if anybody's got any.
Thank you, Kieran. Are there any questions from any members? Councillor Truswell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that this committee across all parties have embraced the notion of social value, and I wish to see it implemented wholeheartedly. And there is reference in the review to social value. It says Leeds could also consider a higher level of ambition on social value. And I think that the covering report indicates how we are beginning to push the boat out. We've clearly got the mechanics in place. They're beginning to bear some fruit, and the report does indicate all the steps that are being taken. However, it goes on to say that other councils have gone beyond the 10% social value weighting in procurements that Leeds use as a minimum to a 20 or 30% weighting. And I suppose my question is, did we start off at 10% as a kind of suck it and see percentage, with a view maybe then to escalating the percentages? And if not, why not? And perhaps you could tell us, from your point of view, the practicalities of moving that percentage from 10 through 20 to 30, based on other authorities' obvious experience.
Yes, it's exactly the case that we started at 10% in order to, well, as you said, suck it and see. In terms of social value in general, we've basically been trying to really get started on it, get a sensible way of introducing it across all our procurement activity, and make sure not only is it included, because we have been including social value in contracts for several years, but what we've really struggled with is keeping on top of it and monitoring it and understanding what's actually being delivered and making sure that it is delivered. In terms of other authorities, I think that there definitely are other authorities, I think particularly across in Greater Manchester, that put sort of 20% in and potentially even more. The feedback we got from the LGA is that increasing those proportions doesn't mean that you end up paying extra through the contracts. But I think from my personal perspective, I think I'd like to get social value fully and properly embedded, get the information and the data that comes out maybe after a sort of a full year of using social value portal to monitor the social value that's delivered, and then take it forward from there. But certainly I'll be reporting back in the next assurance report and pick that up then. In terms of practical issues internally, some of the feedback that we have had, if you used, for example, sort of a children's services contract, there's sort of questions as to if you increased to say 20%, that would then it would outweigh sort of safeguarding weightings under their contracts, and that didn't feel quite right for colleagues there. So that's some of the practical feedback that we've received that we'd have to manage. But if it was something that as an authority that we did have greater ambitions for, then certainly it seems to be something that you can increase.
Thank Kieran for that response, and perhaps when we do get the monitoring report, we can have this discussion in greater detail.
Councillor Harron.
Yes, please. I've got quite a lot of further questions, but I'll only just ask one now. Perhaps I can ask for a briefing from officers separately some of the time, please. On page 65, halfway down, refers to commercial finance manager being appointed to explore income generation and trading opportunities, including a review of current fees and charges levels. Now, when does that emerge for councillors to see, and what fees and charges are within the scope of this review? It could hide all sorts of things. Could you just give us 1 minute on what this chap's going to do, or this lady's going to do?
Yes, it is a lady. We appointed her at the beginning of September, and she's got a finance background from the private sector, and really we were looking to bring in skills that were more commercial, as the sort of job the job title suggests. And in terms of the overall role itself, it covers all the council's commercial activity in providing support and advice. With regard to fees and charges, one of the things that we're looking to do and that we've started doing, but it's quite a big task because obviously we've got fees and charges across the whole sort of breadth of the council and the services that we provide. It's just to benchmark those against other authorities, to benchmark them in appropriate circumstances against what the market is providing in Leeds as well, and to see where we sort of compare and whether that would suggest that we should be changing any of those fees and charges. I think one of the other things that we're looking to do as part of that kind of audit, if you will, is to make sure that where we are charging, that we're making sort of full cost recovery on things, and that some that we're not inadvertently missing out some council costs when we're actually coming up with what level those fees and charges should be set at. I'm happy to talk about any other questions you've got separately, and also to give you a bit more detail about the sort of the broader commercial finance manager role.
Thanks, Chair. We'll have a separate, but just another 20 seconds. What fees and what charges might go up as a result of this exercise?
Certainly at this time, there's no suggestion that there'll be any change to the fees and charges. I think we need to understand, as I say, sort of how we benchmark against other authorities, and as if we're competing with private sector on some of the things that we do, how we compare with regard to what they charge. But I don't have, we haven't finished the audit, so we don't have the information to be able to tell you what might possibly change and what might not.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a briefing on this new this appointment. My understanding was that it was to do with almost marketing some of the income generation activities we have, and also particularly sort of in the children's services, the ones which where we have some pressures around children's centres, the fostering arrangements, those sort of things. Is that going to be, my understanding was that was going to be her priority. Is that right?
There's a couple of things that have come out of the initial review that we've been doing of the council's income generation activity that she will be looking at, and there is I think a review that you described that's ongoing, and so we'll be looking at that from a commercial perspective and be able to offer advice and support as to, as I say, or rather as I said earlier, as to, if we're not sort of fully recovering costs, where are we missing, and to provide general commercial advice as to how we might change that service, still deliver the service, of course, but change it to make sure that it's either not as much of a cost or hopefully actually does generate more income.
Further questions, Councillor Truswell?
Chair, sorry to come back. I did have one further question. I noticed that on page 72 in the recommendations from the report, the recommendation 7 says that elected members should be engaged with the strategic decision making for procurement and contract management. And I think we tick that box through this particular committee. It then goes on to suggest that there's member representation on the social value and climate change boards. And I'm just wondering what that's something that's missing in the response at the front. If you look at section 7, there's no reference to it, and I just wonder why that consideration of that was omitted.
Sorry, so in terms of the social value board, we do report each year to scrutiny on social value matters, and we also report here in terms of social value as part of the procurement assurance report. So having sort of considered the amount of reporting we do on social value, we felt that was sufficient in that regard. I suppose if the committee did feel that there was there should be more member involvement, then of course happy to consider that. In terms of the sustainability side of things, I think I'm sure we've discussed that with colleagues who are involved in that, and I thought there was member representation in that regard, but I can take that away and check for you.
Yeah, Chair, I was just wondering why it was a dog that didn't bark, and I do accept the explanation, and that could have been put in the report. Perhaps we could revisit it, as Kieran suggests, at some later date.
Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 56 of the agenda pack, which are to note the content of this report and provide comments on the proposal, extend the simplified contract signing process under Article 14 of the Constitution to also apply to contracts valued at exactly £100,000 and thereby align with the administrative decision-making process values under Article 13 of the Constitution? Thank you. We'll move to item 11, Internal Audit Update Report, and I'd like to invite Louise to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So today's report is multifunctional in that it allows this committee to review the adequacy of the Council's internal control arrangements as a whole and consider the annual internal audit report. It satisfies the SIAS requirements for the Head of Internal Audit to deliver an annual audit opinion that can be used to inform the Council's governance statement. Plus, it summarises the work undertaken and completed by internal audit relating to the financial year 2021. So the first part of the report focuses on the annual audit opinion, and I'm very pleased to say that for this financial year, it remains satisfactory. A large portion of the report, so that's from paragraphs 4.5 all the way through to 5.2, details the totality of the work completed, the outcomes, and when it was reported to this committee. So I'm not proposing to discuss this in detail today, but it is largely this work that my opinion is based on. You'll notice that the reporting on the fraud activity has been enhanced compared to the previous annual reports. This is in line with the new regular fraud reports that you have seen also at this committee. Plus, we've also included the assurance themes for each audit area of activity, and I hope you're finding it useful in this report. The remainder of the report demonstrates how internal audit continued to conform to the public sector internal audit standards. As was the case last year, we have based our SIAS conformance on our self-assessment and use this honest reflection to develop our action plan, which is the Quality Assurance and Improvement Plan, which you will also find in the report. I reported last year that I was very pleased to say that the quality processes and procedures are firmly embedded within the function. And again, for the year 2021, despite the full effects of the pandemic, including the continuation of working from home, that this is very much regarded as business as usual. We remain inspection ready at all times. In fact, it's only this month we've had a remote external quality assessment to ensure we retain our ISO 9001 certificate. Needless to say, we passed comfortably. The latter part of the report covers all the feedback we have received in the period. Members will have seen the CSQ feedback within the update reports, but here we also have the feedback from CLT as well. It pleases me greatly that CLT value the work of internal audit and fully support us. So before I finish, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank members for their continued support and constructive challenge through this committee. And hearing the Chair's annual report to full council and member comments clearly demonstrates this. So thank you very much. And by no means least, I'd like to thank the audit team who never fail to show complete professionalism and dedication through the work they do in supporting the council and colleagues. So thank you very much, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Louise. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of the committee that we would also like to thank our appreciation to the whole of the Internal Audit Committee team. Any questions from members? Councillor Truswell.
Just a couple of very quick questions. The tables on page 90 and 91 referring to referrals received and referrals closed. Half the number on both of those relate to resources and housing. And is that simply the case that, particularly with resources, there are just so many more processes and transactions in that particular area that that there are more opportunities for dishonesty, or is it something a little bit more sophisticated than that?
Hi, I can answer that question. I think this was mainly due to the COVID-19 grants that we administered on behalf of the government. So because they were administered through the Resources and Housing Directorate, that is where they fell within our analysis.
Just one other really quick question on page 102 of the schedule relates to Belle-Isle TMO, and I have to declare an interest. I'm actually a member of the TMO board. What does memo issue mean?
I'll take that one. Because they are an external organisation, we issue the reports separately and in a different format. So we don't actually report the outcomes here because they pay a separate audit fee. So it's just to give you the totality of the work. But obviously that is the relationship between the that organisation.
Any further questions from members? Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 75 of the agenda pack, which is to receive the annual internal audit report and opinion for 2020-21, and note the opinion given, in particular, that on the basis of the audit work undertaken during the 2020-21 financial year, the internal control environment, including the key financial systems, risk and governance is well established and operating effectively in practice. B, a satisfactory overall opinion is provided for 2020-21 based on the audit work detailed within this report. C, that the work undertaken to support the opinion has been conducted in accordance with an established methodology that promotes quality and conformance with the international standards for the professional practice of internal auditing. To note that there has been no limitations in scope and nothing has arisen to compromise the independence of internal audit during the reporting period. Thank you. We'll move to item 12, the approval of the annual governance statement, and that's Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall approving the interim version of the annual governance statement at their meeting in July. So this is the updated version since then. There have been amendments to the statement to reflect just the passage of time to some extent. So, for example, there's reference to the receipt of the joint strategic assessment, the review of the medium-term financial statement, the PSN certification that was spoken about at the beginning of the meeting. Also ongoing discussions with those officers with suitable oversight of various areas of concern within the statement. And then the big change for today is the introduction of the action plan for the coming year, some of which is already underway, as members will have noted. That action plan is arranged by reference to the principles set out in the Corporate Governance Code and Framework to ensure that we focus the actions within the action plan on our governance arrangements rather than other arrangements that are dealt with elsewhere within the council.
Thank you, Kate. Any questions from members? Councillor Illingworth?
Chair, this is a minor point, but I found reading these reports unbelievably difficult with no conventions to read if you're in insomnia. That's right, but seriously, some of them are landscapes, some of them are portraits, some are very small font size, and some appear to be written backwards. You sort of turn the thing upside down and trying to work out where the page numbers go. If we had some sort of standardization, then it would be physically much easier to read them.
Certainly that's something that we can take on board. We've got an officer coordination meeting on Monday for the next committee, so we will discuss it in depth at that time. We have been trying in turning landscape to reflect the fact that more and more is being done online and it fits the screen better. So it's juggling that.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate. Any further questions, Councillor Harrand?
On page 136, Chair, almost as the last sentence, it refers to the inadequacy of the Council General Fund reserves. Are we still worried about that? Is that part of the budget proposals, discussions going on now for 22-23? Reserves, please.
Victoria can answer that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As part of the medium-term financial strategy, we've been looking at the level of reserves for the council, and it's one of the things that we've been increasing year on year to obviously increase the level of the general fund reserves, and that's been picked up through the medium-term financial strategy. I think it was recognised that we do need to increase them. But the level that we are doing is part of the assessment that I do on the budget and the risks within that budget, and that will go to full council in February. Thank you.
Any further questions? Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 119 of the agenda pack to approve the annual governance statement? Thank you. Item 13, counter fraud update report, and I'd like to invite Louise to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the second counter fraud update report to the committee. The first part of the report highlights the reactive work undertaken. The table shows the 22 referrals received by directorate and type of issue being raised. We closed 33 referrals in the period, and the table illustrates these across directorates and the outcomes. The second half of the report focuses on the proactive work undertaken. This includes work being undertaken across various work streams. For example, the review of the NFI data matches, raising awareness of fraud risk to staff, and testing on our updated counter fraud training package. We have developed a counter fraud strategy and response plan, which will replace the policy statement on fraud and corruption. This strategy comprehensively addresses the reactive and proactive approaches we as a council take and are going to take to tackle the risk of fraud and corruption. We have also refreshed the whistleblowing policy, which now enables members of the public to report their concerns through this channel, and we will remove the raising concerns policy as a result. An area we have identified that would strengthen our arrangements is the role of a counter fraud champion. This was discussed during the counter fraud workshop, and we would like the committee to endorse the role and for the whips to appoint to it. I would like to request that any interested councillors approach their whips to self-nominate. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Any questions from members? Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 151 of the agenda pack, which are to consider and note these assurances set out in this report, endorse the counter fraud and corruption strategy and response plan, page 169, and note that the anti-fraud and corruption policy will be discontinued, endorse the whistleblowing policy, page 183, and note that the raising concerns policy will be discontinued. Also endorse the role of a counter fraud and corruption champion and that the whips appoint to the role. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 14, Grant Thornton Audit Progress Update Report, and I'd like to welcome Gareth and Perminda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. You have before you the audit progress report and sector update from us. It consists of two parts. The first part, we have also included an update on our work around the interim audit, as well as where we are at with the final accounts audit 2. If I can just ask you to turn to page 208 of the pack, or page 4 of our report. In essence, we undertook our initial planning back in July and issued our audit plan around that time. And you will be aware from previous meetings that there has been quite a challenge in terms of availability of specialist public sector audit staff. The volume of authority audits, which continued after last year's target date of 30th of November, which included Leeds, which has actually had an impact on our ability to progress work as quickly as we would like this year. I think, as we've already previously explained too, the National Audit Office updated its guidance to auditors around the value for money work, and that was that they would like auditors to focus on the opinions audit first and then move on to value for money, which they extended to be no more than 3 months after the date of the opinion being given. We continue to work with the finance team in progressing our audit work, and if you just turn on to page 210 of the pack, this just summarises on a single sheet the deliverables and where we're at with it. The audit plan was issued and that's been considered by the committee. The interim findings are included on the next couple of pages. If we can turn to page 211 and 212. In essence, as part of our interim audit work, we consider a number of areas, including internal audit. Our consideration of internal audit work and their reports has not identified any weaknesses which impact on our audit approach. As part of our interim audit, we also look at entity level controls. Again, no material weaknesses have been identified. Our specialists look at the IT environment at the council. That work is currently ongoing, but based on the work so far, there are no material issues that we wish to bring to your attention, and we will report our final work around that in our audit findings report. And then over the page, we also undertake walkthrough testing. That's principally around the main significant risk areas, which for Leeds are PPE, property, plant and equipment, so land and buildings, but also the pension, net pension liability, which both are very, very large numbers in your account. And then lastly, we also looked at journal entry controls, and that's looking around policies and procedures. And we found those to be appropriate, and there were no weaknesses that we had identified in that regard. The next couple of pages just set out progress on the 2021 final accounts audit so far to this point, which the report was drafted. We received the Council's draft 2020-21 financial statements on the 22nd of July. The public inspection period ran from the 2nd of August to the 10th of September. And we've not received any formal objections within this time frame. At the time we got your draft financial statements, no working papers were available from the council. For the first time this year, the council has used the Inflow platform, which is used by virtually all of our local government audit clients, and it's a database to record working papers that can be easily accessed by all our audit staff working on the audit, as well as the finance team that are preparing the working papers. Working papers have continued to be uploaded and provided to us, and some working papers were provided earlier by email to help us kick off work on PPE in particular. I think it's important to just draw out that timely responses to audit queries is quite important, which helps clear issues as and when they arise quickly. It also means that the audit can progress. And like many authorities, some queries are resolved quickly, others take a little bit longer, and Leeds is not any different. But I think it's important just to recognise that, the sooner we can get issues cleared, the quicker we can progress with our work. Over the page on to 214, working papers. Last year we made a recommendation that working papers should reconcile the figure in the accounts to the council's financial management system, ledger system, so it can be easily followed through and tracked. And I think there has been some progress in that regard, but there are a number of areas where working papers didn't sort of have that audit trail, and I think that's down to you having a very dated FMS system, which is quite difficult to use. It's not very functional, and in order to generate some of the information, it does take time, and numerous manual adjustments need to be made. We are aware, and I believe the audit committee is also, that that's something you're looking at, a new financial ledger system going forward. And I think the last point I just want to draw out on that particular slide is around external audit staff resources. It has been a challenging year for us. It continues to be, and it's quite difficult for us to recruit appropriate staff. We've also had some degree of sickness, and trying to manage that along with fitting in with the timetable has been quite challenging. So we just want to be totally open and transparent in that regard. That's the general update on the audit. The second half of the report is a sector update. Now, this is just really for your information. Don't need to do anything for this, but it's trying to just bring to your attention certain developments which are happening within the sector that you may not be aware of, and summarise where you might go for more information. Just three I just draw to your attention. Page 216, insight into accounting for grants in local government. This is a paper that we did some months ago around treating particularly additional grants you're getting for COVID, whether they should be treated as you treat them as agent or principal. The accounting treatment does differ. So that's quite an interesting read if you do have half an hour spare. Page 219, local authority COVID-19 pressures. This is from the Department of Levelling Up, or MHCLG as was. It's just interesting just to see some of the financial pressures that different types of authorities are facing across the country. And the last one I just want to draw to your attention is on page 221. This is a paper from the National Audit Office, good practice in annual reporting. And I think they've drawn out there some of the things that other public sector organisations actually publish, which users find of help. And that might be something that you take on board going forward. I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Parminder. Any questions from members? Councillor Harrand?
Yes, please. I wrote to you 2 or 3 weeks ago on the subject of Grant Thornton, and I understand that my concerns, that the email was passed on. Members of the committee know that in the past year, Grant Thornton has twice appeared in the financial pages of national newspapers about, in inverted commas, inadequacies in their audit of 2 private sector companies. And on each occasion, Grant Thornton was, again, I don't know if fined is the right word, but had to pay £2 million. Do Grant Thornton want to comment on that to us now?
Happy to pick that one up, Chair. So obviously fully aware of the 2 instances that Councillor Harron refers to. I think I would say that they occurred a number of years ago. The people involved are no longer with Grant Thornton. And obviously that was in a different sector to the sector that Parminder and I and our team work in. GT have put in place a revised sort of audit quality structure. And I believe that we've had no formal reviews initiated by our regulator within the last 2 years in terms of audit work done in that period, which is a real positive. I think the other thing to emphasise to this particular committee is that the public sector audit market is very thoroughly regulated by the Financial Reporting Council, the FRC. So each year they undertake a review of a number of audit files, and it's based on a proportionate basis of the audit market sector that each firm has. And as the leading provider to public sector audits, GT has the highest number of files reviewed. I should also say as well, Chair, that one of my files was selected for review for one of the 1920 audit files. It was a local government audit, not Leeds, but one in this region. I have to say that that review was a very thorough and rigorous process by the FRC. Their review actually took longer than the audit, our own audit of that particular local authority. A lot of the people involved in that particular audit are also part of the audit team here at Leeds, including myself. And ultimately, the outcome of that review was very positive. So we were graded as a good file with limited improvements required. There were only 2 findings on our particular audit that they thought things could have been done a little bit more clearly on the audit file. Nevertheless, that was a very good outcome. As I say, it was a very rigorous process, and hopefully that gives assurance to this committee that the audit work that we are doing across our local authorities is appropriate, it's detailed, it's in line with the auditing requirements, and is of an appropriate standard. And that's some of the reasons why, as Parminder mentioned in his section, you know, the audit process is taking longer now because we're doing a lot more detailed testing and rigorous work, particularly around the valuation of assets, the valuation of the pension fund share. That does take time, but you know, I can give the committee assurance that the work we are doing has been well regarded by the regulator, and indeed the particular file that I was reviewed on, there were certain elements of that was flagged as good practice by the FRC, particularly in terms of the work we did around the valuation of land and buildings at that particular council. So I don't know if that helps to reassure Councillor Harron's point. Thank you, Chair.
Harron, thank you for those assurances, Gareth. Any further questions? Does the committee agree the recommendations that are set out on page 201 of the agenda pack, which is to receive the audit progress report and to note the progress to date in delivery of the 2020-21 audit? Thank you. And we will then go to item 15, the work programme, and that's Kate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's the usual work programme report. My understanding is that the approved audited accounts and audit report will now come to the February meeting rather than the December meeting. And I see Gareth's nodding. Other than that, no suggestions.
Any comments from members? Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 195 of the agenda pack to consider and approve the work programme and meeting dates at the Appendix 1? Thank you. The next meeting will take place at 2 p.m. on Friday, the 17th of December, 2021. I'll bring mince pies and... Okay, whatever. Is there a wish list? Thank you. That concludes the meeting. Sorry, Councillor Horan.
Give my apologies for that meeting because at precisely that moment my son is getting married
Oh,
in East Yorkshire. So
congratulations to your
absolutely
family.
refuses to change the date for the government. So I shall not be here.
Thank you, Officer.